everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And today I'm joined by Dawn Taylor to talk about this year's Manipulate Festival. Dawn is the artistic director and CEO of Manipulate Arts, so is the perfect person to tell us all about what we can expect. Hello, Dawn.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm very well, very well. It's good to see you again. And before we get into the specifics of this year's programme, can you give us some background into the history of Manipulate?
Yes, and before I answer that, I just have to apologise to viewers for given the title of this podcast, I feel a bit of a traitor because I've got a map of London behind me, but I'm talking from a hotel, so hopefully our signal all works out nicely. So a bit of a history, yeah. So actually, Manipulate Arts, the organisation behind the festival, celebrated its 40th anniversary last year as an organisation founded in 1984, primarily dedicated to children's puppetry. And since that point, it has grown and grown. And of course, now Manipulate Festival, which is entering its 18th year, is a festival primarily for adults. And along the way, we have picked up visual theatre and animation as art forms that we champion. And now, really, the organisation is dedicated to promoting, celebrating, presenting work, which I guess the way we talk about it is that it's anything which is primarily driven forward by image rather than by text, or which breathes life into the inanimate. And all of our art forms fall under that those headings. And so the festival itself, Manipulate Festival, has been, as I say, it's in its 18th edition and has grown and grown and has really prioritised a kind of blend of international work and Scottish work, although that mix is a little different for this year, which I can tell you about in a moment.
And that's interesting that you say it started as a kind of children's, well, was the children's thing that before the festival, or was there a strand in the festival that was a children's festival?
So there was actually a different festival called the Puppet Animation Festival, which ran for 39 years in various regions across Scotland and the north of England, and was about family work. And so for a number of years, we actually produced two festivals as a tiny team, with Manipulate being the offering for adults and Puppet Animation Festival being for families. And now Manipulate is our only festival, and that focuses primarily on adult work, but we do produce a lot of work for families around the rest of the year in regions all across Scotland, which you can find out by checking out our website, which is manipulatearts.co.uk.
And one of my questions that I'll ask later on is what, outside of the festival, what your year is like. But that's given us a brief insight into the other things that are going on. But let's talk about this year's festival. And you've mentioned some of the different strands. Could you go into a bit more detail about those?
About the different programme strands?
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just preface that by talking about how it's just slightly different this year, if that's all right. In that usually we would host about a 10-day event, and this year the festival is 4 days, and there's lots of reasons for that. Sorry if I'm preempting one of your other questions here, Alistair.
That's all right.
But I think it helps to contextualize it that way when I talk about the strands. So yeah, viewers may know that there's been a kind of significant funding crisis in Scotland, and that has been for organisations and also for artists. And at the organisational end, it means that we are, operating on a significantly lower budget than usual. But for artists, really, I think a lot of artists that we support tell us they're just really struggling to survive because access to funding has been so challenging. So we decided this year to divert a lot more of our usual funds that we'd spend on international flights and freight and all the costs of putting on a bigger festival, really just to support artists to develop their work and make their work, and then focused on how we can bring audiences into that to help illuminate the process of what actually goes into bringing a piece of work to the stage and how complex it is, specifically for these art forms where people devise, and by that I mean where they collaborate in a room to make work together rather than writing it down on a page. It takes a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
And so our festival strands, maybe the festival looks a little different, a little more bijou, a little smaller than usual. But as usual, we have a live performance strand, and we present full performance works. And this year there's 2 Scottish premieres as part of that. We have a work in progress strand whereby audiences can get a glimpse of things that are maybe not quite finished but are in the stage of being developed and offer their feedback and see how the work kind of comes together. Then we have a film strand through which we have animated shorts and features. And we have workshops for professionals along with talks, events, discussions. And this year we have a new category of events called Open Studios, which is specifically in relation to that decision to invest more in artists. And that's where artists will just open up the making room and audiences can come in and try things out and maybe learn a bit of a new skill, but also really find out and get a first peek at how the work is developing.
So I'm presuming because it's hit, as you say, this funding and other pressures are across the arts. And I know some festivals over the last couple of years have just not gone ahead. The thing was we will make it different so that we can go ahead and in some ways pare things down, even if it's just the length of time that we're doing it, we'll pare it down. Is that a kind of I take it these were really difficult discussions?
Well, yeah, it was really challenging. It's challenging to make those decisions because you have to weigh what your audience needs and what the artist community needs, and also the well-being of staff and the sustainability of the organization. And also as a sector development organization representing a whole cluster of quite niche art forms, we have to be mindful of the position we're holding, where that if we are not there for artists, then there might not be anyone else who is. So
Yeah.
this felt like a way for us to kind of address and tackle all of those responsibilities and really have a conversation with ourselves and with the sector about what sustainable festival making looks like in future.
Yeah.
I
I
hope
think
it looks better funded.
oh yes, absolutely. But it's so interesting because I think for so long, growth was what people were looking at. How do we get bigger and bigger and bigger? And because that's had to be turned on its head, it's interesting how different people are approaching, how can we get better perhaps, but certainly how can we still survive?
That's it. One of our board members, Emma Jane Park, is holding a discussion for us as part of the festival on degrowth, and that's her. She's doing a master's degree in that at the moment. And degrowth, unlike maybe the title would suggest, it's not about shrinkage.
Yeah,
It's about resisting this idea of constant growth
yeah,
and questioning how we do things, not just how much or how little is there, but what really is our approach and what are the values that we hold in relation to how we decide to move ahead. And that allows us to get into a whole interesting territory about festival culture. Festivals are amazing. They're these brilliant times to bring people together across geographic and language divides, across social and cultural divides for a moment and an experience. And I think since COVID, audience behavior is changing. People are really seeking experiences that are exciting and transport them.
yeah,
But we also have to be mindful that what's behind those intense big moments is resource and drain and potential burnout for the people running it. And so I think these conversations are essential and timely, regardless of the funding crisis. But the funding crisis has just accelerated that we all need to have them now.
yeah. I think it's so interesting that the funding crisis will have focused the mind of many people, but actually wider that question of um, degrowth, for using that term, but that of the pressures that everyone puts on themselves, perhaps it's reflected not just in the arts, but reflected in people's everyday lives as well. It's a really interesting area.
I think so. I think all of us are having to ask those questions, even if it's just what can I afford
Yeah,
now?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like paring back on the shop, the weekly shop, and as part of that, then you have a little bit of a conversation with yourself, or perhaps in your house with your partner. What matters to me? You know, if we can't afford as much, well, does it matter more that we go on holiday, or are we just trying to keep the lights on actually, or does it matter more that we can still buy these things, physical things, or do they not matter? Or and so people are having those conversations in households. That's exactly what's happening behind closed doors in organizations.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
guess a part of this year is just about trying to open some of those closed doors and be really transparent with our community, which includes our audiences, and say, this is where we are. Like, where do you feel we should be? Because also what people have told us, and one of the reasons we really pressed ahead with a festival this year is, January and February are dark, cold, difficult months, difficult for mental health. One of the exciting things about Manipulate being one of the few festivals that's on at that time
yeah.
is that we provide people with this moment of togetherness and joy and escapism. And we know that psychologically that feels important to people, but we want to know how we can better serve the audiences to make sure that going forward, the model really continues to deliver that.
It's so true. I was at a Celtic Connections gig last night, and I was talking to some people, and we were just saying, I don't know how we would get through January if it wasn't for this happening every year.
Yeah.
And with your festival in particular, because um, there's not really many or any that do what you do in terms of what you cover and who you kind of feature. It really would be, it seems more vital than ever in that sense.
Yeah.
But continue.
When I think in a cult in a where like funding levels are relatively low, and we know that Scotland is towards the bottom of the table in terms of European funding for culture. Sorry, in terms of bottom of the European table in terms of national culture funding relative to GDP, right? We know this, and where there's a bit of scarcity, it creates more potential burnout because you think, well, I couldn't go biannual with this festival because people need it, because there's not another offering, because there's less funding. Therefore, it's more likely that people will overwork because they know that they need to fill that gap. So I know a lot of festivals have been talking about this biannual question, and it's certainly come up with us. And the reason that it hasn't happened yet, may happen in future, is because we feel that need to make sure that still exists for people, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned the website. We should really let people know where they can find the program and get tickets and all those kind of details.
I remember you asked me this question last year, and I've said it already, the URL, but I had the same freak out. Do I remember the website of my own organization? Yes, so everything is on our website, which is at manipulatearts.co.uk. And in the festival pages, you find all the listings. The tickets are for sale through the individual venue box offices, but the links are all there through our website. So that's the go-to place to then find where to book for everything.
And we should really let people know physically what it looks like in terms of venues and where it is. And it's all in Edinburgh, is that right?
It's all in Edinburgh, with the exception of some of our films, which you can find online. And they're geo-blocked to the UK, so anyone anywhere in the UK can access the online film programme. Otherwise, everything takes place in Edinburgh. Our venues are the Traverse Theatre, the studio at the Festival Theatre, the French Institute, the Fruit Market. We have some workshops in Dance Space and at the Hub.
Mhm.
And then we have a tour with our One Bum Cinema going all across Edinburgh libraries, actually for 8 weeks, starting in the festival period. So there's lots all over Edinburgh to find and do in 4 days.
It's actually a really nice way of doing a tour of Edinburgh if you don't know the city, to go to different venues around there. And if people haven't heard us talking before, you maybe should explain what the One Bum Cinema is.
Yeah, the One Bum Cinema, it sort of does what it says on the tin.
Yes,
It's a
okay.
cinema for one bum, although, as I found out with my son last year, two bums can squeeze in. So if you, it's essentially a little mobile cinema, which is a converted shed, which will be touring around libraries. All the details and dates are on our website. It's totally free. You go in to the shed, you press a big red button, and a 3-minute program of animation is generated for you. And it's some of the world's leading animators. It's really exciting work. It's completely family friendly, mostly non-verbal or totally non-verbal, and if not otherwise captioned. So it's accessible, and it's great for families to do. So you can sit with a child on your knee, or you can go in just on your own. Yeah, it's a fun event.
And if people, I mean, you mentioned that people can view films from outside of the actual festival, but if people can't make it, are there other ways that they can get involved?
Yeah, so I mean, year round there are, Manipulate Arts
Yeah.
delivers activity in Edinburgh year round, but also we have specific communities that we're building longer term relationships with. Because when we held the Puppet Animation Festival back in the day, we used to deliver work all over the country, and the touring landscape has changed. And also the funding landscape. And so really we have these specific focus communities we have relationships with. So we work a lot in Caithness in Sutherland, in the Highlands, in North Uist, and also generally in the Outer Hebrides, in Cumbernauld and North Lanarkshire and surrounding area, and then in Western Edinburgh around kind of Whale Arts. So everything around that program, which is mostly family work and involves workshops and performances, can be found on our website in the pages marked Captivate. That Captivate is our nationwide program, so people can check that out. Also for professional artists, there's a year-round development program of opportunities like seed funding, mentoring, networking. And then just for general interest, we also have some links on our website to things that you can try at home. So there's a puppetry at home strand on our website, which has lots of video tutorials on building and making your own puppets, maybe with your children or with a community that you work with. So there's lots to get involved with.
And we've mentioned kind of audiences. Are you finding at this stage, because of all the things we've discussed, that actually audience feedback and the relationship with audiences is more important than ever?
Definitely. I would say that, I mean, practice seems to be changing on that front anyway, in terms of the way that organizations and audiences interact, but it feels far more like a dialogue now, and that's what we would want it to be. Yeah, I think that it's really important that a conversation is had between audiences and organizations. And so that's why, maybe perhaps unusually for an art form driven organization, one might expect the talks that we had at our festival or the discussion events to be all about technique and discipline. And we, of course, we love those talks, but we're really interested in the how and the why of festivals and audiences and society, and what society we all want to be part of. And so we try and involve our audiences in it as diverse a range of conversations as we can. And people can feedback in lots of different ways.
So in terms of putting the programme together, is that part of your role for the rest of the year? Are you finding out what's out there and that kind of thing?
Yes, I mean, that's the bit of the job that there's so many bits of the job that I love, but what a privilege, what a privilege to be paid to attend festivals and unearth gems that we think Scottish audiences are just going to love. So, and it's been one of the heartbreaks about not having international work so prevalent in the festival this year, because we actually have been to festivals and have found fantastic work that at the moment we just can't afford to bring. Hopefully that will change for 2026. So we look forward to a big return to an international showcase. So we tend to visit maybe 5 to 7 festivals a year as a team. Sometimes that's involved working with external programming artists who also come and work with us and attend festivals on our behalf. So that kind of diversifies the voice that's shaping the program. And then, of course, we attend a lot of Scottish work, sort of year round. A huge part of our remit that we're really passionate about is helping Scottish work to premiere. So quite often, new work will be presented at the festival that is from Scotland, and we haven't seen it. We see it for the first time at the same moment that the audience does, and that's always quite special as well, because you're watching something be born. So we have conversations with artists all through the year about ideas that they're working on, and sometimes we get to come into the rehearsal room and watch these things grow over time and then share them at Manipulate. So it's a big mix of that, and it's definitely one of the best parts of the job.
And is that also one of the things about the challenges of putting on a festival this year, if you can turn things to a positive, is perhaps more focus on the Scottish side of things?
Exactly. And we really, exactly that. A huge part of our role is to amplify Scottish work. I would like to get back to the point whereby we are premiering Scottish work, and we also invite delegates from all over the world to see it, so then the Scottish work can go out and be shared more broadly. But as a positive, these artists, some of them we've been talking to for 3 or 4 years about these pieces of work, and now they're being born, coming to life, in their kind of final version at Manipulate. So I just can't wait to see them, and I hope that audiences can come along and share that with us.
I think that's something that I hadn't thought about, but for the kind of nature of the stuff that you present, a lot of it will take a lot of time. It's not maybe the same as a comedian writes a different show for Edinburgh every year or something like that. This can be happen over a number of years. So sometimes are you recognizing that quite early on and saying, well, this won't be ready for this year, but in subsequent years we may be able to show this?
I think that's it. because of the artist development side of what we do, we're in conversation with artists sometimes from the very first seed of an idea. Excuse me. And so some processes are quicker than others. And I wouldn't like to suggest, I've worked at the National Theatre Scotland and the Lyceum, and I know that in their literary departments, there's just as much rigor and sometimes just as much time over a long period of evolving work. But I think the nature of work that doesn't live off on a page
Yeah.
means that almost every time you have to move forward, or you want to move forward, you have to get in a room with humans. And yeah, it just takes a really long time. But that makes it all the more rewarding. Frustrating for artists sometimes, because also part of what is causing those delays is trying to find the next bit of funding that's going to help get to the next stage of development and then get all the feedback and know that you've still got work to do. So then you've got to get the next bit of funding. So we just try to support and nurture that process as much as we can. And we're here for any artists who have ideas, who want to pitch to us or talk to us, even if you're not sure what the idea is yet. That's part of what our function is, to help have those conversations and help things find their way to the stage.
And going back to this year's programme, and you mentioned workshops. Now, are they workshops for people of differing levels? If someone just is interested but has no background, in whatever the workshop's about, could they just come along?
Very much so. The workshops are targeted at professionals and aspiring professionals, is what we always say. So I think if somebody is just they're not designed for drop-in general interest. They are designed for people who are at least considering building a career, but you don't need to have done anything in the past. There's no
Right.
prerequisite of experience. And we have certainly had people come along because they think they might be interested and then go to the workshop and afterwards they're like, I'm hooked, that's it, I'm going to be an artist. So and that does not have to be a 19-year-old who has that experience. We've had artists present work at the festival who first discovered these genres at the age of 55 and thought, this is the new direction for me. So everyone's welcome.
And now here's the impossible question. Do you have anything at this year's programme that you're particularly looking forward to? Can you choose anything, or is that too difficult?
I am particularly looking forward to everything. And we obviously value all our artists equally. But of course, I can highlight some particular things which might be of interest to audiences. So one of our new premieres that I'm particularly passionate about, because this is one of these groups of artists that I've been in discussion with for a really long time, is a new piece by Group Work, who are a physical, visual, dance theatre ensemble led by Findan Hertog and Vicky Manderson. And they've got a new piece called When Prophecy Fails. And this company have got such a knack for finding a really niche, specific story at a particular moment in time and using it as a way to explore really universal ideas. So this piece is about misinformation and it's cognitive bias, where we, but kind of not cognitive bias, cognitive dissonance, whereby we're predisposed to a certain belief, and then every bit of new information that comes in just reconfirms that belief. And we all know how relevant that is with the way that the internet and media works now. And they're using a 1950s UFO cult in America as a way to explore that subject. It's going to be a gorgeous show, which opens at Manipulate. And then we also have some really exciting collaborations in our film programme. So we're working with Sanctuary Queer Arts on a new lineup of queer animation, animated stories from around the world, highlighting the stories of gay, transgender, lesbian, queer people. And what's so exciting about that is I think animation as a medium has this ability to shine a light on stories which might be difficult to tell with live action, maybe because it's unsafe. So if you're a gay person living in a country where it's illegal to be gay, it's much harder to bring in a film crew than it is to animate your story. And it also allows for stories of transformation or flights of fancy and magical realism in ways that are harder again with live action. So we're really excited about that, and also a partnership with Take One Action Festivals on a program looking at kind of climate, community, and Indigenous stories from the circumpolar north. So yeah, I guess those would be some bits maybe to highlight. Have I got time for one more?
You have, yes.
So we've got a new partnership this year with Alseed Productions on an event called Cartography. which is a real experiment, an innovative sort of new way of approaching performance. Al has mentored 6 artists who are all developing new works, which are specifically intimate performances for one artist and a very small audience group. And they're just different experiments in different genres: film, theatre, a bit of exhibition, installation. And we don't know what they'll be yet. So there's 6 different artists. Audiences will work their way through a kind of maze and discover these different intimate performance installations. And I think it's going to be super cool and kind of what the spirit of Manipulate is about, which is pushing boundaries and trying new things.
It sounds amazing. It really does. And you mentioned, just before we finish up, you mentioned a few times there collaborations. And do you think collaborations right across the arts will become increasingly important as the challenges that we set out earlier on are met?
I think so. I think that they're important for funding reasons,
Yeah.
but that's not really why we embark on them. I think
Oh,
for us, it's about, I guess I've never really bought into the idea as an artistic director that one person's vision should shape a program.
yeah.
I never think it's going to be as representative for audiences or as exciting or as dynamic. So we're just always looking for ways to broaden perspectives. And also, one of the brilliant things about the internet is that if you have a really niche interest, you can find it. But the algorithms then are trained to just generate back content that you already know you're looking for. And I think by working across art form, across different kind of groupings, we also have a piece this year which is a sort of contemporary classical music and puppetry mashup. And we're just so excited because those audience groups probably don't come together that often. And actually, people might find, oh, I'm a music fan and a puppetry fan. So it's just about opening up these new channels of ways of working and making sure the broadest range of perspectives inform what we do. And I think audiences have a richer experience because of it.
And that whole idea of creating more conversation, I think, can only be a healthy thing as everyone is facing similar challenges. And so any discussion about, well, how can we do these either together or just, do you have ideas? I think it's it seems to me it's happening across the arts and culture, which, to end on a positive note, that's a really good thing. Don, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You always get me excited about Manipulate coming up. So all the best for this year's festival and for the future.
Thanks so much, Alistair. And till next year, I guess.
It will be, absolutely. And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.